So this is the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, and this is the iPhone 17 Pro, and yes, this is just the Pro, not the Pro Max. Now there's already a ton of videos about Apple's Pro Max versus Samsung's Ultra, so you're free to go watch those because those are great. For me though, I thought that these two phones were sort of an interesting comparison. The smaller iPhone 17 Pro has the exact same camera specs, same build quality, the same processor, and even the same cooling system as the bigger Pro Max. The only difference with the Pro Max is that it's got a bigger screen and a bigger battery. So on the iPhone side, $1,100 for the smaller iPhone 17 Pro is actually the starting point for the S-tier top-end hardware experience for Apple phones. But on the Samsung side, to get the best hardware, the best camera specs, and the best build quality, you need to get the S25 Ultra. Ironically, even though Apple is known to be the more expensive brand, it is technically cheaper in this comparison. So technically, to get the top-end hardware being that S-tier experience, the starting point is a little bit cheaper on the Apple side. And also, since this is iOS versus Android on top of Apple versus Samsung, this is a very loaded comparison. So I'm going to break it down as best as I can and let you guys know which phone might be the better buy for you. First things first, they obviously have a very different look and feel. The iPhone 17 Pro has smooth rounded edges, aluminum body frame with the glass panel on the back, and of course that new big plateau on the upper back. The Galaxy S25 Ultra has blocky flat edges, glass front and back with a titanium frame, just a uniform flat back with camera bumps with these rings around them, and there's even an integrated S Pen. Even though the iPhone does have a more utilitarian industrial look to it this year, and the Ultra has a more minimal uniform design, I personally think the Ultra goes even further in that direction of an industrial look. Now, even though this two-tone isn't my favorite, the smooth rounded edges of the new iPhone seem a little bit more approachable than the Ultra. And thanks to this more rounded design, I also noticed that the third-party cases are rounder and more comfortable to hold too. Now there's technically a 12-gram weight difference between these two phones because obviously this is the bigger phone, but in real-world use, since the weight distribution of the Ultra is so well done, there's honestly like very little difference between the two. And of course, since the Ultra is bigger and blockier, the iPhone is easier to use one-handed. Now all these are pretty minute details, but one big advantage I noticed about the iPhone 17 Pro is the haptics. They just feel a lot better tuned on the iPhone side. They're a little bit more subtle and softer while giving you good feedback. I will say that the better haptics does give it more of a premium feel compared to the Ultra. Now in terms of displays, if you want a bigger screen for bigger content consumption and gaming, the obvious choice is the Ultra here. Now if you don't care about size, these displays are very comparable. Both are very high quality LTPO OLEDs with really nice color reproduction and rich inky black levels. They've also got the same super smooth variable refresh rates and also about the same pixel density and peak brightness levels. And even if we disregard specs, I do think the Ultra does have the better display. Even though both have anti-reflective coating, the Ultra cancels out more of the reflections. I also found the auto brightness to be more responsive on the Ultra, and even though their peak brightness levels are about the same, the Ultra's display gets brighter. So with these two things combined, the Ultra's display is just more visible during sunny days outside. And at night, the software also lets you make the screen much darker than the iPhone, so it's much more convenient to look at in darker environments too. Now in terms of speakers, both phones have stereo speakers, so they both sound great, but I do have to give the edge to the iPhone. You get noticeably more depth and richer sound quality, nicer bass levels, vocals sound more crispy. The iPhone speaker quality just sounds a little more subtle and softer and nicer on the ears, while the Ultra just sounds a little bit more harsh with maybe too much treble. I used to think that the Ultra had the best speakers around it. They're still really good, but this iPhone 17 Pro did ruin my perception of the Ultra just a little bit. Now in terms of battery life, it's obviously kind of unfair since the Ultra is a much bigger phone and it's got a bigger battery. But yes, the battery life is better on the Ultra than the smaller iPhone 17 Pro. I'm a pretty heavy user and I can get a full day's worth of battery life on both phones from light days to busy weekend days. On the Ultra, I get about 6 to 6.5 hours of screen on time. On the iPhone 17 Pro, I get about 5 to 5.5 hours of screen on time on most days. It's not like a mind-blowing difference, but during that last mile of the day, the Ultra gets me a little less anxious than the iPhone. Then with charging, the Ultra also gets the win there with higher peak charging speeds. With the compatible fast charger, you can get a full charge on the Ultra in just 1 hour, while the iPhone takes about an hour and 20 minutes. So even with a bigger battery, the Ultra still charges up faster than the iPhone. Now if you do want a better charging experience for your iPhone, your laptop, and all your other devices, you might want to check out the Anker Prime DL7400 docking station, the sponsor for this portion of the video. Pro. So this thing is a 14-in-1 docking station made for triple display setups. Anker is calling it the world's first triple display charging dock with stable 8K, so you can get one stable 8K60 display connection with two 4K60 outputs on top of that. Through Display Link, even your MacBook can get this triple display setup, and it's not limited to screen mirroring either. You can get different content on each screen with this. As you can see, this thing comes with a ton of ports, and that includes 4 USB-C ports that all support fast charging. So these Type-C ports have a total output of 160 watts, and when used individually, each USB-C port on the front can get up to 100 watts of output, while the one upstream port on the back here gets up to 140 watts of output by itself, which is pretty insane. So you'll definitely have no problems at all charging all your devices right here on your desk. And thanks to the nice LCD screen on the front, you get transparent info about the charging and data transfer speeds, display status, and temperature, so you know how all the connected devices are behaving. Plus, if you want, you can get even more info about each port and get more config options using the Anker Dock Manager app for either Windows or Mac. Now, all this is a lot of power and a lot of ports to deal with, but thanks to the built-in active cooling system, Active Shield 3.0, this docking station monitors the temperatures 24/7 and automatically maintains thermals and keeps things cool using the built-in fans. So if you want to upgrade your desk setup with a powerful charging docking solution for your phone, your laptop, and everything else, definitely check out the Anker Prime DL7400 docking station using the link below. By the way, while you're there, don't forget to sign up as a member too, since you'll be able to get special discounts on upcoming new Anker products. Now, in terms of the general software differences between these two phones, now iOS does feel smoother with tons of new liquidy, blobby animations thanks to the new liquid glass aesthetic. Compared to One UI, there's much better first-party customization options for the lock screen. Even though I'm not a big fan of the settings for each app being deep in the settings on iOS, I do give iOS credit for unifying most settings into one area. So as much as iOS 26 made things doing anything take more steps than before, the software experience is still much more streamlined compared to One UI, which has 2 apps of everything by default, including texting apps, app stores, browsers, wallet apps, and more. With all that said though, this new version of iOS 26 seems to have a lot more bugs than expected. Some apps would totally freeze on me, or some parts of the UI just go unresponsive. And I also noticed on iOS, there are some really strange data connection issues from time to time where the data is just suddenly so slow or just stops. This happens on Wi-Fi, this happens on the cell network, and the only way to get it to work full speed again is to put it on airplane mode on and off, and it's back up to full speed. So with all these bugs on iOS and One UI not being as streamlined as iOS, I personally still feel that the software experience on One UI 8 is more reliable than iOS. So like I said, even though One UI doesn't feel as smooth as iOS and there are more frame drops from time to time, but there's much less instances of total app crashes or unresponsiveness. And if you're willing to dig a bit, you do get much more advanced features on Android and One UI over iOS. You get so much more multitasking options and features. You can use Good Lock to get much more customization options for the home screen. AI features are much better integrated with One UI than iOS. Circle to Search, translations, and Gemini are so quick and easy to access and use, and I actually do rely on these AI features all the time, especially the translations. Now on iOS, Apple Intelligence just isn't that straightforward to use and is very slow to load for every prompt. It just doesn't feel that reliable, so I tend to completely ignore it and just use the ChatGPT app instead. So with these current iterations of iOS and One UI, I do feel that Samsung has the better execution here. But if you're someone who doesn't care about these more advanced features, you just want a more streamlined software experience, and you're willing to wait for Apple to solve all these bugs, then iOS might still be the better option for you. Personally, I do prefer the higher flexibility and reliability of One UI. Okay, now on to performance. Both phones have top-of-the-line processors with the latest chips from Apple and Qualcomm, and both have vapor chambers to help with the thermals, especially during heavy loads. Of course, you're going to see some differences in benchmarks and numbers, but in actual use, my thoughts here are pretty consistent with my thoughts on the software differences. Both have really good day-to-day performance. iPhone feels smoother, but Samsung feels faster thanks to their UIs. So the day-to-day performance is really about the software, so take your pick there. But in terms of peak performance with games and higher demanding tasks like photo and video editing apps, taking raw images and navigating the camera UI, I did find the experience to be much more consistent and reliable with the iPhone. For heavier things like this, the iPhone generally had better thermal management with the phone not getting as warm as quickly as on the Ultra. Games performed just a tiny bit better on the iPhone with slightly better optimized graphics, which is also big thanks to better developer support on iOS, and for longer play sessions, I did notice better sustained performance on iPhone. When you do take raw images on both phones, Samsung takes some time to refine each image. The iPhone also takes a bit of time, but is noticeably quicker than the Ultra. So summing it up, the Ultra had the better day-to-day performance, while the iPhone had better peak performance. Okay, finally, let's talk about the cameras, which is probably the most important part for a lot of you. In terms of rear camera specs, they're pretty much on par with the iPhone having a slightly larger main sensor, while the Ultra has larger sensors for the ultra wide and the periscope telephoto. But the Samsung does have an additional 3x telephoto lens. It's not that good of a lens, but it's definitely still a hardware advantage. By the way, all the photos I'm using for this comparison were all shot with a default camera mode, so that means both in HEIC format, 24 megapixel mode for iPhone and 12 megapixel mode for the Ultra. So we're going to take it lens by lens. For the main sensor, the iPhone 17 Pro has warmer tones and greener hues, while the Ultra has cooler tones with a bit more purple hue. They do produce about the same amount of detail, but if you really pixel peep, you get a bit more on the iPhone. And on the iPhone, you get a bit more natural background blur, which makes it look a little bit more professional. What Samsung's a little bit better at is contrast. It's not afraid of contrast, it's not afraid of shadows, it's not afraid of light, it's also not afraid of color, so it's willing to blow the balance to get the more accurate shot. I feel like the iPhone photos always try to strike the most balance. It lifts shadows, it lessens highlights, balances colors between lighting situations, and it does tend to undersaturate, which actually makes it a less color accurate photo. But because the iPhone is trying to balance out things a lot more, it's better at highlights, where Samsung photos tend to go overboard with the highlights, making it seem a little bit more overexposed. And on the iPhone, the smaller details look a little bit more natural with less artificial sharpening. Samsung photos this year do look a little bit more processed. This is kind of funny because when I did my iPhone versus Samsung video in 2023, it was completely the other way around. So if you look at the little details in the background, like the leaves and the clouds, it looks a lot more natural on the iPhone. And also, since the iPhone tries to balance things out more, it does perform better in harsh lighting situations, especially when the light source is bright. And with that, it's also better in low light situations as well. It shows more detail while providing better dynamic range. Then for the ultra-wide lens, I feel like they're pretty on par, but the iPhone 17 Pro does produce a bit more detail if you do pixel peep. And same as the main lens, it does look a little bit more natural because there's less artificial sharpening. The S25 Ultra is not afraid of contrast, so it's a little bit more contrasty, and it's slightly cleaner in low light with less grain. Then for 3x images, of course, the S25 Ultra gets to win here since it's the only one with a 3x telephoto lens. With 3x photos, you do see a difference with telephoto versus no telephoto. Compared to Samsung's 3x telephoto shot, the iPhone's 3x digital zoom just looks a little bit blurry. Then for the periscope telephoto lenses, the iPhone 17 Pro is much better at capturing moving objects. As you can see in the shot here, Samsung didn't do that good of a job with the moving water here. And like the other lenses, iPhone tries to balance things out more, so it does perform better in harsh lighting situations, especially when the light source is really bright like this river. But what Samsung does better at is the more natural background blur. So here it does look a little bit more professional than the iPhone. And with the periscope, I much prefer the contrast levels with the S25 Ultra. And with the digital zoom, the iPhone did a much better job in 8x zoom. It looks a little bit more natural, less artificial sharpening, and I think Apple just did a good job optimizing for that 8x zoom. But beyond that and up to like 30x zoom, you'll see that the Samsung just does a better job with the AI optimizations. At 30x, iPhone just feels like a crop, while the Samsung photo looked like it got a somewhat decent zoom. Now both zooms aren't that great at 30x, but there you go. As for the rear camera video, I found that the iPhone handles tough situations much better. So just like the photos with the harsh light source, the iPhone handles that much better, while the Ultra has some really weird rainbowing issues. And also the periscope telephoto lens on the iPhone just focuses much better as well. Overall though, I'll say that the footage looks more clear on the Ultra. And Samsung also has better color reproduction. For some reason, iPhone video just kills colors and these look pretty washed out. Like the colors, iPhone also kills shadows and contrast. On Samsung, there's a good amount of contrast for the video. And for far zoom in situations like 8x or more, I did find better stabilization on the Samsung. On the other side though, the iPhone's new center stage selfie camera is a square shaped sensor that's also much more wide angle. In terms of the quality, I feel like it's pretty much a wash. The iPhone selfies do better with contrast, details are cleaner, looks less artificially sharpened. It does balance harsh lighting sources better, but for the skin tone, it's a bit of a toss up. It's sometimes better on the iPhone, sometimes better on Samsung. iPhone also wins for selfie videos. It produces more detail, there's less sharpening, so it looks more natural. It's also wider angle by default, which is more flattering for the face. And the coolest thing is that you can record in landscape format even while the phone is in portrait orientation. So it's really perfect for vlogging. I filmed my whole Japan trip with this phone, so check that vlog if you haven't already. Now these comparisons were completely on auto, but a lot of these thoughts also translate to shooting in RAW. For the iPhone, you can tell that the main sensor gives much more natural bokeh compared to the Ultra. iPhone photos, even in Pro RAW mode, still do come out more balanced than the Ultra. The Ultra is still more contrasty, but it still does too much with the highlights. So with this balance, it actually makes the iPhone Pro RAW photos easier for me to edit afterwards. And compared to Samsung, Samsung, the ProRAW mode on iPhone is much more accessible. You can have it as your default mode. When shooting in RAW on Samsung, you have to go through the Expert RAW app. So it's basically a completely separate camera mode or app experience. It would definitely be much easier if we had it all on the same app. Also, Samsung RAW images take much longer to capture and process, so it doesn't feel like a quick capture like it does on iPhone. So with all these things together, I do prefer the camera experience better on the iPhone compared to the Ultra. The iPhone has better unified camera UX with a ton of flexibility for taking selfies and better accessibility to shooting in Pro RAW. It's also a more reliable camera in tougher lighting situations, and I do prefer the softer, more natural post-processing on the iPhone than the Ultra. The Ultra does have some advantages with slightly better zoom and higher quality video recording, but the biggest advantage with the iPhone has over the Ultra is simply that the apps like Instagram and TikTok are just better optimized for iOS than Android. Now, sadly, these social media apps treat compression much better on the iPhone compared to Android phones like this. You know, those times you post a story, a reel, or TikTok and it's weirdly low res? Yeah, that happens a lot less on iOS simply because the developers favor iOS users more because there's more money there. So that's definitely unfair because it's due to market forces and not really about the capability of the phones, but that's unfortunately the reality of the situation. Alright, so putting everything together, I said a lot of different stuff, and each of these S-tier phones has some big wins over one another. Okay, so the iPhone 17 Pro, it's got nicer ergonomics, better haptics, higher quality speakers, a more elegant looking software experience, better peak performance, and ultimately a nicer camera experience as well. The Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra has a nicer display, better battery life with faster charging speeds, better day-to-day performance with a more reliable software experience with some really useful multitasking features and AI integrations. If price is the big factor, then of course the iPhone is a better deal since it is $200 cheaper than the Ultra. Now if you think these phones are expensive anyway, it really comes down to which features are most important to you. Now for me personally, while I really miss the convenient AI features and the multitasking features on the Ultra, I've gotten really into the overall camera experience on the iPhone 17 Pro, and I got some of my favorite shots ever with this phone. So ultimately, I do prefer the iPhone 17 Pro right now. When compared to my Galaxy Z Fold 7 though, that's actually a completely different story for another video, so if you're interested in that comparison, make sure to subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for that. Let me know in the comments which phone you'd rather use as your daily carry. Thank you so much for watching, thank you to Anker for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one.